Get myself on screen. There we go. Hello, welcome. Golly. So let's start off. Things I am a little concerned about what's going on in Russia today as far as their kilo cats and prepping. Welcome, Diana 2, John H. So I am a little concerned about the nationwide nuclear preparedness test that Russia is doing tomorrow. So remember, Moscow is 8 hours ahead of Austin, Texas. So if you're Eastern time zone, that's 7 hours ahead of you. Hello, Rebecca's Happy Homestead. I think that's the same Rebecca I know personally, right? I hope. Sumi, welcome. But Moscow is 7 hours ahead of the East Coast, and 8 ahead of Austin, 9 ahead of El Paso, Denver, and 10 ahead of the West Coast. So, if you look for something that probably happen as early as noon tomorrow, gosh, fantastic to see you. Thank you, Rebecca. And tell John I said hello too. But anyhow, so I would say, so if we look at it happening about noon tomorrow, then that could be around 2 o'clock Austin time tomorrow morning. So that's about 6 hours from now. So make sure you're prepared. I just redid, I did it over a year ago, but I did a video, a short. It actually is 1 minute and 1 second. But I redid a video on how to make an inexpensive personal protective equipment, basically fallout gear, to protect you against nuclear fallout. Now, it does not protect you against radiation. What it does is you just don't want to have any of the fallout dust particles get into your hair, on your body, especially into your lungs, because you can't get rid of them if they get into your lungs. So I did a 1 minute video. Do me a favor, check out that short on personal protective equipment. Maybe I'll even just put a link here. Let me see here, and I'll put that out there, and then it may give you an idea what you can do. Just make sure that you doff the equipment. Once you put it on, make sure you take it off in such a way that all the radioactive fallout falls away from you, instead of concentrating down. So you learn how to take care of. Make sure you learn how to take off, your poncho. Actually, what I would do probably is I would probably cut it down the center and just have it fall off. The last thing you want to take off is going to be your mask. Next to last thing before that's going to be your gloves. But anyhow, let me see if I can't get the link here for you. Lee's channel. And we're going to stop this video, and then we're going to go to manage videos and shorts. Gosh, I should have had this prepared ahead of time. I am so sorry. I feel like I'm kind of wasting your time. Go to dashboard. And inexpensive personal protective equipment. There we go. So there it is. And let me get you the link. Come on. I'm taxing this poor old Apple MacBook. I've got it. I think I've got it played out to the max. So come on. It's not going to let me click on it to get a link. Okay. Well, I will try to put that in the show notes in the meantime. Let me see. There it is. Okay, now I got it. There we go. Okay, so you might want to consider taking a look at this video. You can get the equipment, probably build your own set, your own personal protective equipment to protect you against fallout. Now, this is not radiation. just the fallout itself. So you want to get rid of that contains the radiation and not take it indoors with you. So I'm going to put that link there, and that's that video. So do me a favor, copy that and watch it when this is all over. For about $25, you can build yourself a really decent personal protective equipment. Now, remember, all we're trying to do is get from the vehicle to your shelter. Going to get rid of it. We're just trying to keep all that radioactive dust from going on your body and in your lungs. Those are the two main things we want to accomplish. Okay, so we've got 12 people here already. Wow, thank you. Okay, hello, Tofu. I haven't seen you in a long time. Welcome, Theoxerus. How are you? Little Known Prepper, Butch Graves, Rebecca's Happy Homestead, of course, saw her earlier. And golly, what a great group of people. Okay, so we're continuing on with the USCIS citizenship questions. The next one that we're asking in this series, I'm leaving out the ones, what's the name of your governor, what's the name of your congressman, what's the name of your senators, and all that kinds of stuff. Yeah, that's kind of, I want to get down to the brass tacks of our government and how it runs and how it operates. So if the president can no longer serve, who becomes the vice president, or who becomes the president? So if the president can no longer serve, whether he's impeached, passes away in office, what is it, the 27th Amendment, I believe it is, that you can remove him. 27th Amendment. No, that's the compensation. 25th Amendment, I think it is. Yeah, 25th Amendment. In case of the removal of the president from office due to his death or resignation is where this comes from. All right, Utah Mike. Amen. Hello, Texas Red Leg. Welcome. Okay, so yes. So if the president is incapable of performing his functions, now that can be removed because of medical reasons. It can be because he's terminal. He has passed away. It can be because of impeachment or anything else. Hello, Susan's Ramblings. The vice president takes his or her place. So if both the president and the vice president can no longer serve, who becomes the president? So let's say that the president and the vice president are together, something catastrophic happens, both of them are gone. Now who becomes the president? So this is under Article 2. Section 3, I believe. No. Oh, it's multiple things. It's multiple amendments and multiple things. I've got it. All right, Texas Red Leg, absolutely. Susan's Rambling, correct. Hello, Tofu, Little Known Prepper. God, look at all these people. They know it. All right, Speaker of the House, absolutely. So the top three are all elected officials, let's call it. Okay, and then after that, we can get into appointed officials. Number 4 is actually elected as well. So the top 4 are elected. So if this is according to the order of succession, this is not a question. This is just additional information to answer the question. So the presidential succession is referred to multiple times in the U.S. Constitution. So Article 2, Section 1, Clause 6, the 12th Amendment, the 20th Amendment, and the 25th Amendment. And that prescribes basically the order of succession. Now, when it comes to the secretaries are in the order in which their cabinet position was created. So the very first person that was created as a secretary, of course, was the Secretary of State for International Affairs. So once you go through the 4 elected officials, the president, the vice president, the speaker, then number 4 down here is the president pro tem of the Senate. Now that is the person who is an elected senator who is running the Senate while the vice president is not in that position. So it's usually like right now, it's Chuck Schumer. He is the Senate Majority Leader, so therefore he's the President Pro Tem of the Senate. Then after that comes the appointed officials, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Defense, the Attorney General, Secretary of the Interior, Agriculture, Commerce, Labor, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Transportation, Energy, Education, Veterans Administration, and finally, Department of Homeland Security. Okay. See what we got. Yeah, that's, and little on prepper, that's a great observation, because my personal opinion, for what it's worth, I mean, you can probably take my personal opinion of $5 and get a $2.50 cup of coffee. But my personal opinion was one of the reasons that they wanted to impeach President Trump was so that they could then impeach the new President Pence, and before he had the opportunity to appoint a vice president, impeach him, and that would have made Nancy Pelosi the president. And Utah Mike, no, I can't. Although I don't know if you saw it today or not, but her advisor when she was in California has been selected by Governor Nancy Pelosi's nephew. What's his name? The governor of California. Anyhow, her advisor, Kamala Harris's advisor, has been selected to be the replacement senator for Dianne Feinstein. And so, yeah, it is terrible, Rebecca, and it is something else. Well, thank God Janet Yellen is not on that list. Okay, so that's kind of great. But anyhow, Newsom, thank you, Gavin Newsom. So he appointed the replacement senator for Senator Feinstein, rest her soul. Now, I did not care that much for Senator Feinstein. She wasn't a very effective politician, and she knew how to manipulate things. The main reason I don't like that I had little to no respect for Dianne Feinstein was she got a contract for her husband to be the sole real estate agent for all property to be either acquired or dispensed of for the U.S. Post Office. So can you imagine being the exclusive real estate agent for procuring land and selling land? Here in Texas, the standard commission is 6%. So just think, he got 6% off of, if we use the Texas number, of every single post office piece of land that was ever bought or sold since he was appointed to that position. So that's the main reason I didn't care for her that much. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution. Who is the Commander-in-Chief of the Army? This is Article 2, Section 2. I think I'm right. Let me check here and make sure. Yes, very first sentence, Article 2, Section 2. Yahoo! Rebecca's Happy Homestead. So Article 2, Section 2 says, the president shall be the commander-in-chief of the Army and the Navy and of the United States and of the militia of the several states. When called into the actual service of the United States, he may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer of each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices. So that's basically why we have the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the military is there to advise the president on their capabilities. So, okay, good job. Number 4. Who signs bills to become laws? Believe it or not, this is actually. Oh, thank you, Sumi. You're right. I had it in my mind that she was the head of the Federal Reserve. I'm sorry. So you are correct. Um, the president, absolutely correct. So the president has the authority to pass laws, and maybe a potato head. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, next one. Uh, who vetoes bills? And then let's talk about how that happens. Who vetoes bills? And I think a good example of this is the discussions around the continuing resolution, the 45-day continuing resolution that was signed, was made into a law, and basically it's going to keep the government open for 45 days. So when it was being initially proposed, there was a discussion between the Democrats and the president. And the president said, "Don't sign them." So don't know what happened. We just know that there was a discussion between the speaker and the president. And a short while later, the president called the head of the House minority um, and leader and said, "Go ahead and you can vote for it." And so they allowed him to vote for it. He called Chuck Schumer and the president had a discussion. They were allowed to vote for it. So basically, the Democrats in the House and the Senate were doing whatever the president wanted on this bill. So we now have a 45 day extension. My fear is nothing's going to happen in those 45 days because we are so entrenched on both sides. Okay. So how does the president veto a bill? So basically what happens is when a bill goes to the president signs it into law, or he can refuse to sign it and he can just veto it. And when he vetoes it, it goes back to both houses. And then they can overcome that veto with a majority vote. Now, it's not a simple majority. I forget whether it's 2/3 or 3/4, but they have to override it with a substantial majority. There are those people who want to have what's called a line item veto. So let's say that I have a defense appropriations bill, and in that defense appropriations bill, there's a $35 billion fund to clean the sidewalks in front of Nancy Pelosi's house. And so what happens is typically somebody will say, "I'm not going to vote for that bill because I don't want that rider or that amendment to that bill." And so then the other side says, "Oh, you didn't vote for this super important thing." They say, "No, I voted against the amendment. Give me a clean bill to vote against." So there are a lot of people who think that having a line item veto would be fantastic, where the president can scratch out a line on a bill, veto only that line, and then pass the rest of it, so that line has to go back to overcome the veto. So let's take the current stance. And so the current stance is that they want to fund building of a border wall, and they want to have tighter controls on the border and deny people entrance into the U.S. So in order to get that, the other side is giving up some things that they don't want to give up to the other side. So now both sides are giving something up in order to come to an agreement. Now, if the president has veto authority, single line veto authority, then what he can do is he can take down that agreement, and only pass what he wanted in the first place. And so I don't think we want to have line item veto because that takes away the entire ability for people to negotiate and to come to consensus agreements. But that's Lee's personal opinion once again. Thank you, Rebecca. 2/3 majority. Yeah, I'm afraid you're absolutely right. I think that we're going to just continue to see nonsense funding, nonsense spending, and it's crazy. That they've got that printing machine, that printing press for the dollar bills and the $100 bills, just going like you would not believe. Um, so, what does the president's cabinet do? So, what does and these now? Remember, these are all citizenship questions. Then, if we have time, I'll give you one of my favorite constitutional things that people forgot to mention here a little while ago. Okay, so the answer that the USCIS wants for the citizenship test is they advise the president. Um, so, and we kind of discussed this one already. What are two cabinet level positions? And so those were all those people in the line of succession after the president pro tempore of the Senate, which is actually the Senate majority leader if the vice president is gone. Speaking of which, have we ever had a person? This is just a trivia question. This isn't a USCIS question. Have we ever had a person as a president who was not elected as either president or vice president? You got it. There you go, Rebecca. Absolutely. Yeah, state and treasury. There you go. Good ones. Good ones. Thank you, Susan Gemling. So have we ever had a president who was not elected as either president or vice president? Katz and Prepping says yes. And who was that? Do you remember? One term, didn't get reelected. Fantastic. Look at that. Golly, great going, Rebecca. All right. Yes, Gerald Ford. Remember, President Nixon and Vice President Agnew, Spiro Agnew. Spiro Agnew resigned, and then President Nixon resigned after having appointed Gerald Ford as his new vice president. So Gerald Ford was not elected as the vice president. Then Richard Nixon resigned his presidency. And remember the 25th Amendment, when he resigned, then of course the vice president took over. So Gerald Ford is the only person in our history that was not elected, but did serve as president of the United States, neither elected to president nor vice president. Hello, David. Welcome. So for those of you who don't know, David Lynn, Prepper Principal, does a live just before this one every month. I think he does it Mondays and Tuesdays. He does it before both of my lives. But he has a live that starts at 7 and mine starts at 8. So let me see where we are here. Okay, so the secretaries are the Secretary of Agriculture, Commerce, Defense, Education, Energy, Health and Human Services, Secretary of Homeland Security, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, Interior, Labor, State, Transportation, Treasury, and then bring it up with Veterans Affairs, the Attorney General, and the Vice President. Okay, next one. What does the judicial branch do? Or what are they supposed to do? Let's put it that way. Yes, so anytime you have an appointment, okay, that requires a 2/3 approval of the Senate. The House doesn't get involved, but the Senate is the approving authority. So yes, once Spiro Agnew resigned, then the president nominated Gerald Ford, and with the advice and consent of the Senate, he was appointed as the vice president. And then, of course, President Ford resigned, and that made Gerald Ford the president. What does the judicial branch do? Basically, law, that's correct. Yeah, absolutely. Determines whether a law is constitutional or not, only if someone challenges the law. So they don't just willy-nilly. If Congress passes a law today, they aren't going to look at that law and say this is or is not constitutional. What they're going to do is they're going to wait until somebody takes it through the judicial system saying, I object to this law because here's what it violates as far as the Constitution. Yes, absolutely. Adjudicates matters. Anything else? Okay, so the 4 answers that they're looking for in the citizenship test are: it reviews laws, okay? It explains laws. So it can, if we take something like Obamacare, if you'll remember, Chief Justice Roberts put out an explanation of why he thought it was legal, and then that changed the overall Supreme Court, and they approved Obamacare going into law. They resolve disputes or disagreements, especially between 2 branches, the executive and legislative branch, etc. And then they decide if a law goes against the Constitution. And now that can be the implications of the Constitution as well. For example, there are some things that are not explicitly stated in the Constitution that the Supreme Court has ruled and said, this is implied. It's an implied right. So you've got, Mapp versus Ohio, Miranda versus Arizona, Escobedo versus Illinois. So those are all criminal rights that you have. The most important one, the one that you probably become most famous, is the Miranda warnings, the Miranda rights. So that was a Supreme Court interpretation of the 4th and 5th Amendments. It was not, it's not explicitly in the 4th or 5th Amendments, but that was the Supreme Court rendering an interpretation of that. Yeah, and I'll give you another good one where nobody ever really took it up, and I wish they had. They kind of barked up the right tree, but they barked up the wrong tree, and I'll show you where that goes. Yes, there are there are cases. You're absolutely right, where there is judicial activism, and I think we're going to see a lot less of that now that we have the Supreme Court that we do. It was in the past where they were creating law. For example, the 1972 oh gosh, now I forgot the case. Roe versus Wade. Okay. There is nowhere in the Constitution that it gives or implies the right to take the life of an unborn child. Okay. So that was something that the extremely liberal court at that time, in a 6-3 vote, said that they were going to give that right. So the original case of Roe v. Wade was not over the legality or illegality of abortions. What it was Roe wanted to have an abortion, and in the state in where she lived, in order to have that abortion, she had to have the father of the child's consent to have that happen. So Roe v. Wade, what it really said was, in order to have an abortion, the woman does not need the consent of the father. Okay. Now that, through further interpretation at the lower courts, is how we ended up with, quote, the right to abortion. And that's not what it said in any case. And so finally it was adjudicated correctly that it should not be at the federal level, but it should be a 10th Amendment issue. And that is that it's a states' rights thing, that the states have the right to make that decision. Remember, all of the laws about taking a life and everything else are at the state level, with one exception, and that says no cruel or unusual punishment, and that's in the Constitution. But other than that, murder, manslaughter, all those things are state laws. They are not a federal law. So we have to remember that, and that's part of that 10th Amendment. And afterwards, she also became a very active opponent of the decision, and she fought against it continuously up until it was overturned. Hello, Sandy Errand. Welcome. Good to see you. Let me see here. Where are we? What is the highest court in the United States? So this is Article 3, Section 1. I hope. I've been wrong once tonight about Janet Yellen. Thank you, Sue Me, for correcting me there. I appreciate that. And then thank you, Rhonda, for looking up and getting the 2/3 majority to override a veto. And Diana, too, you are correct. It is actually the Supreme Court. So what it says is Article 3, Section 1. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So basically, the Constitution establishes the Supreme Court. That's the only court that it establishes. Then Congress establishes the appellate courts, the judicial courts, the federal courts, and everything else, other than the state courts. Now, state courts are governed by the state constitutions. So like Texas has its own Texas State Supreme Court, which, by the way, most of our senators have at one time or other been on. Let me see. Okay. Come on, doggone it. Where's my mouse? I get to this point where it just does not like to scroll. So let me activate my mouse and see what I can do with it. Oh, here's Helen. So everybody wish Helen a happy birthday. Okay, next one. How many justices are on the Supreme Court? So in my little thing that I did about protecting yourself from fallout, somebody just put a comment and said, none of that will stop the radiation. And I was very explicit in saying it won't stop the radiation. It stops the dust from coming in contact with your body. Why don't people pay attention? I will respond to that later. Okay. Come on, doggone it. Where am I? Oh, I'm not in YouTube. I'm supposed to be in here. And 14, there we go. Hit the right button. 14 comments. 9 is correct. Does anybody know how many were originally on the Supreme Court? Original Supreme Court was 5. It moved up to 9 under FDR because at that time there were 3 conservative justices and 2 liberal justices. And of course, hello, Shenanigans, welcome. And of course, FDR wanted to get through some of the things that were kind of socialist, such as Social Security and a couple of the other things. The National Labor Relations Act, which gives more power to the unions than it does to the company. There were all different kinds of things that he wanted done. And in order to do that, he needed a supportive Supreme Court. So he had the Senate change the Supreme Court from 5 members to 9 members. That gave him the opportunity then to appoint 4 new Supreme Court members. So by appointing those 4, now instead of having a 3-2 majority, he had a 6-3 majority. And it's been 9 ever since. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, is talking about adding 2 to 4 more Supreme Court justices, and we call that packing the court. But he wants to add 2 to 4 more justices so that President Biden can do the same thing that FDR did, and that is flip the court by virtue of the fact that that he has more appointees to the Supreme Court. So just be aware of that. Who is the current Chief Justice of the United States? This is a citizenship question. Helen knows. It's her maiden name. There you go. Cats and prepping. Absolutely. Diana, too. Great job. Okay, number 12. Under our Constitution, some powers belong to the federal government. What is one of the powers that is entrusted to the federal government? Now, remember that our Constitution was written to limit the government, not to limit the people. You know, it starts off, we the people. So it is absolutely, there's one of them. Great going, Diana, too. So all the only things that the Congress is allowed to do is what's mentioned in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution and the 16th Amendment. So yeah, cats and prepping, that's exactly it. Yes, not make money, but print money. Yeah. Make laws, absolutely, correct. So the four answers, you can choose any one of the four that the federal government is looking for your citizenship test. Is they can have the right to print money, to declare war, to create an army, to make treaties. There's a whole bunch of them in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The one I have underlined here is to establish a uniform rule of naturalization or immigration. And so it's supposed to be uniform, to quantum money, regulate the value thereof, provide for the punishment of counterfeiters, establish post offices and post roads, promote the progress of science and useful arts, constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, define and punish practices or piracies and felonies committed on the high seas, declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, make rules concerning captures on land and water, raise and support armies, provide and maintain a navy, make rules for the government and regulations of the land and naval forces, to call the militia, provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. I mean, there's a lot of things, but some of the things that we see them doing regularly, they don't have the authority to do. And don't know why we haven't challenged that in all reality. Okay, under our Constitution, some powers belong to the states. What's one of the... Understand. Gotcha. Yeah. Don't worry. I'm way ahead of you as far as making boo-boos tonight. So people are going to have to hurry up and make as many as I do so I can feel better. Under our Constitution, some powers belong to the states. What's one of the powers of the states? So we've already talked about one, and that is, they have their own state laws defining murder, things like that. So, of course, that's providing laws concerning crimes. Great one. Great answer, Little Pepper. Provide education. What else? Now, notice this is not a federal. We have a Secretary of Education. Education is not a federal responsibility. It's a state responsibility. What kind of licenses, Diana, too? There's no requirement to provide health, or at least there wasn't until Obamacare. Oh, by the way, the other night we were talking about healthcare and everything. The very first healthcare insurance or healthcare network or whatever was created in the Pacific Northwest, and that was Kaiser Permanente. I forgot the name of them at the time, but for those who were here and I had that senior moment, Kaiser Permanente was the first healthcare system established in the U.S. that was non-religious. Okay. Oh, I found out something interesting today too. I did not know it, but Catholic University is offering tuition-free RN studies. So if they think that because of the fact that the country is suffering from a shortage of RNs, if anybody wants to become an RN, they can apply to Catholic University and go for free to become a registered nurse. Absolutely. 10th Amendment. You got that right. Absolutely correct. If those things that are not mentioned in Article 1, Section 8 or limited under the 16th Amendment, which is income tax, everything else belongs to either the individual in Section 9, I'm sorry, 9th Amendment, or to the states, reserved to the states in the 10th Amendment. Absolutely correct. So property ownership, yeah. Yep, I'll go with that. Death penalty, whether or not, yes, but the federal government also has its own death penalty. Remember that the only death penalty in the federal government is for treason, and it has to have 2 witnesses. So, absolutely, very valid point, Dan. Too. So they want to have this federal elections commission. And that's actually against the Constitution. Elections are run in accordance with the state's laws, not in accordance with federal laws. Okay, so a carbon tax. So basically, that's what's happened is that's supposed to be state, but the EPA has run roughshod over a lot of the states. Here in Texas, I worked for the Texas Air Control Board, which was the air pollution control. I was HR director there. And until we merged with 12 other agencies to form the Texas Natural Resource Conservation Commission. The EPA runs roughshod. And so we told them, no, you don't have authority. As long as our enforcement standards meet the federal guidelines, you don't have any authority here in the state. So, that's what it was. Auto and business licenses, yes, absolutely. Now, here's the strange thing. We used to have the states funded the US highway system. So the state was responsible for paving, number of lanes, and everything else. Any US highways, and they were designed so that they intersected with another US highway that was funded by the state with which it intersected. So when we used to drive to my grandmother's, we could tell when we left Texas and got into New Mexico, and then back into Texas, and then into Oklahoma, and then into Kansas. You could tell by the quality of the roads. But nowadays, with these federal transportation dollars, basically, you've pretty much got the money being spread out equally across the board so that states are kind of almost equal. You can't tell that much of a difference when you leave one state to another in the quality of the highways. Now, the interstate system is supposed to be 100% funded by the federal government because, believe it or not, it's a defense system. The reason that President Eisenhower built the interstate system was so that we could rapidly deploy ground forces in the event of an attack by a hostile country in any portion of the U.S. So basically, if you notice Interstate 40, I think it is, goes right by Fort Valley, Kansas, the middle of nowhere. Interstate 35 goes up right by Fort Valley, Kansas. So you've got these interstates right there in the middle of the country. So why are they there? There's nothing there but farmland. Well, because Fort Riley's there. That's why. And they want to get that 1st Infantry Division to respond somewhere in the U.S. rather rapidly. Same reason why we have Interstate 35 and 37. I think it's 37. No, it's not. I forget what it is. They go to Fort Hood. So, you've got all these interstates. And if you take a look, all of those interstates are going to be very close to a major land forces component. Okay. So what they say the states are responsible for that they want you to answer is provide schooling and education, provide police protection, provide safety like fire departments and rescue squads and things like that, driver's licenses, zoning and land use. So we had one of the vice presidents of our HOA here where I am. We had a meeting and she said, "Has anybody seen these flyers?" And what we couldn't tell. And said, "Yeah, I've seen them. Why?" And what it is they were trying to get approval to have the undeveloped land just west of us designated as 8A land, or basically for low-income housing. And she said, "This is just a plot by those Republicans to make President Biden look bad." I said, "Where were you during civics class? Because President Biden has nothing to do with zoning laws. Whether it's 8A real estate or not, it has nothing to do with the federal government. It doesn't even have anything to do with the state government. It has to do with the county government. So there's different layers of government. So one does not necessarily always go up as far as making people look bad." What are the two major political parties in the United States? Oh, here's another one too, Diana. Diana, too, that's kind of interesting is marriage licenses. And for example, there are some states that you can get married without parental consent at the age of 14. In a lot of states, the age of consent is 18. 16 with parental consent, 18 without. Some states you can marry a second cousin. Some states you can't. So marital laws are also determined by the states. I can't argue with you there. I cannot argue with you there whatsoever. Well, the National Guard is going to be usually run by the state, unless it's nationalized, federalized by the president. Now, that's one of those authorities he has in Article 2, Section 2, okay, that as commander-in-chief, he can call the National Guard to active duty. But up until the time it's called active duty, it is under the discretion of the governor. So like here in Texas, typically most small towns are going to have a company-sized unit. In a town like San Angelo, let's say, is going to have a battalion headquarters. We've got 5 different battalions here in the greater Austin area. We might have an entire 3 or 4 battalions in Dallas, Fort Worth, or 3 or 4 battalions in Houston. Your National Guard armories are going to be in a central area of the people that it's drawing from, citizens, to come in to perform that service. So a lot of times it looks like they're in strategic places. They are, but it's only so that they can bring in people logically in the area that they serve. There's another good answer. And there we go. I think y'all have got it. Absolutely. I'll accept that one too. I don't know if the government would, but I'll accept it. And then these are kind of dumb questions, but what's the political party of the president right now? And that's one of the questions on this test that you have to have memorized. And then we're not going to bother because I think everybody knows it. The other one is, what is the name of the Speaker of the House of Representatives and what is his party? So what I would like to do is I would like to go back and talk a little bit more about the president. We're going to talk about rights and responsibilities when we get to the next one. When we come back next week. And so that's going to be about 12 to 18 questions, if I'm not mistaken. But I would like to go to Article 1. If you remember, there was a big stink about whether or not President Obama was authorized to serve, Article 2, whether or not he was authorized to serve because they thought that he was born in Kenya rather than in Hawaii. And, so there was an awful lot of effort going to do that. But if we go to Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Clause 5, Article 1, Section 1. No person except a natural-born citizen at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of President. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States. There's a key term there that was determined in an 1832 Supreme Court decision, and that is a natural-born citizen. So in order to be a natural-born citizen, anybody know what that requires? There are two requirements for that. And people said that John McCain could not be president because, of course, they claimed that he was not a natural-born citizen because he didn't meet one of the two criteria. So in order to be a natural-born citizen, you must be, number one, born in the U.S. Number two, both of your parents must be U.S. citizens at the time of your birth. Okay, so they said John McCain could not be a U.S. citizen because he was born at the U.S. Naval Station in Panama Canal. So, but anytime you have a military establishment, that's considered sovereign U.S. soil. So he was born on sovereign U.S. soil. He was born, therefore, in the U.S., and both of his parents were U.S. citizens. Whether or not President Obama was born in Hawaii or Kenya, we kind of beat that dog to death. But his natural-born father was Kenyan and never became a U.S. citizen, ever. His adopted father was Indonesian and never became a U.S. citizen. So both his natural father and his adoptive father, neither one of them was ever a U.S. citizen. Therefore, he does not meet that second portion of it about being a natural-born citizen. So I wish people had pressed that issue, but they kind of dropped the ball. They got focused too much on the Hawaii versus Kenya birth. But there was a valid Supreme Court decision defining a natural-born citizen. I'm going to answer this the proper way, and the proper way is, remember, the Supreme Court can only make decisions if there's a lawsuit requiring the Supreme Court's intervention. Nobody ever filed a lawsuit about his ineligibility because of his parentage. There was one that was filed because of his place of birth, and that never made it to the Supreme Court because they found the short form birth certificate from Hawaii, even though that was, some people say, debunked and was an invalid system. So the correct answer is because nobody ever successfully proved through the court system that he was an unconstitutional president, then we have to say that he was, by de facto, a constitutional president. So who'd have had standing? Anybody. Anybody could have, if you'd found somebody that would take it up. Now, here's an interesting thing. If you take a look at most of the trial attorneys are going to be Democrats. And there's a very logical reason for that, because try to sign a contract, read a contract and see if you understand it. And you've got, for example, if you buy a business or if you buy a home, they're usually 144 pages of what for is, therefore is, what ifs, and everything else, and whereas and all this other kind of stuff. And you take a look at it, you get so confused, you say, what the heck is going on? Well, they're written by attorneys for attorneys. They're not written for us. Okay. So how does an attorney keep themselves in business? by complicating the laws. So who is the one who wants more laws? The Democrat Party. Who wants less laws? The Republican Party. So basically, a criminal attorney, a trial attorney, by being a Republican, is basically trying to get himself voted out of a job because they want to simplify the laws. So that's kind of how that all works. That you've got this inherent. You want to keep yourself alive. You want to protect your career and your career field. So that's part of that issue about the overcomplication of laws and all this other kinds of stuff. Something tells me, little known prepper, that you are about 99.9 to the 27th degree correct. I don't think that would have been allowed to stand one way or another. Okay, I think that's all I have for this evening before we get into all these alerts. Golly. Yeah, that's all I have for this evening. So I think we've kind of covered everything that we have there. What questions or observations do you have, if any? So this morning in my prayer studies, my biblical studies, first thing in the morning, I came across Ephesians 4:32. Man, I'll tell you what, one of my new favorite verses in the Bible. So see if this doesn't sound familiar. Ephesians 4:32. Be kind to one another, compassionate and forgiving, as God has forgiven you. Isn't that something that I found? What I basically say, that's probably inspired. Be kind, polite, and respectful to each other. Unbelievable. I would find that kind of supportive stuff. So anyhow, that's kind of where we will do the same thing again next week. Now we've got two more. Absolutely, Sandy. So every day at 3:00, I do what's called the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. And so we believe that's a very powerful prayer. And I will add you to my list for tomorrow at 3:00. And the reason we do the Chaplet of Divine Mercy at 3:00 is because tradition has it that that's the hour that Jesus died on the cross. So that's when divine mercy was imparted upon us. So we ask for even further divine mercy for those people who need it. And health and healing is merciful. So absolutely, I'll add you to that prayer tomorrow. No problems whatsoever. So let me see. Tomorrow we have our nonfiction book club. It's our next to the last session that we'll be discussing the book on situational awareness. Then we'll have that for tomorrow and the following week. Don't forget, I'll have a link in the show notes. Get your copy of this is volume, not the third edition. I have been using for the last 40 years the first edition, so I upgraded to the third edition. Gosh, I'm already running out of tabs and highlighters. But anyhow, so get that ordered. We're going to start talking about that 2 weeks from tonight. I think it's important enough where we're not going to have that 1 week interim in between. So that get those books now. We're going to start through that first chapter 2 weeks from tonight. This coming Thursday night, we're going to be finishing up what we should have done last Thursday, but I had a medical procedure. I was afraid I would be way too goofy to be live on camera. So we're going to be talking about Homecoming by A. American this coming Thursday night. The end of this month, we're going to be doing volume 2 of Franklin Horton's book. And it's going to be Ashes of the Unspeakable. So that's going to be the last Thursday of this month. So we got 2 fictions this month. We've got 2 nonfictions this month. So, wow. Do me a favor. Stay aware Make sure you stay close. Don't be afraid of that October 4th test of the emergency announcement system. Do not be afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it. I think that we're going back to basically the Conrad system that we had when I was a kid up through the Cold War. And so Cats and Prepping, the nuke book discussion is going to start 2 weeks from tonight. So next week we'll finish up the situational awareness, and then so that's going to be, I'm looking at my calendar, the 17th of this month is when we start the Nuclear War Survival Skills book. We'll do chapter 1. And so that's pretty much it for this. Don't forget, let me put that down here again. This is my video on how to do a real quick, inexpensive emergency preparedness PPE, personal protective equipment. Okay. So with that, remember that we're all in this together. So we come out the other side. Oh, I forgot to do numbers. Numbers 6 verses 24, 25, 26. We got to do that first. So numbers. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you kindly and grant you peace. So remember that we're all in this together, so we can come out the other side together. Ephesians 4:32, be kind, polite, respectful to each other, because togetherness is the key. Everybody, please stay safe. And thank you for being the wonderful, wonderful subscribers that you are. Take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.